Well, viewers, the Prime Minister was at the BRICS summit just a few hours earlier, where he sent out a very strong message to Pakistan and its backers. At the BRICS summit, the Prime Minister put the focus on how terrorism remains one of the most serious challenges facing humanity and urged all BRICS nations to come together to work towards eliminating terror and take action on their supporters. Now, at the session on peace and security and reform of global governance during the BRICS summit, the Prime Minister reiterated India's commitment to the values of peace and brotherhood. Let's take you through the key highlights of the Prime Minister's message at the BRICS summit. The Prime Minister has spoken about having no double standards on terror, calling out countries that have double standards on terror. In his message, the Prime Minister has said that terrorism is among the most serious challenges facing humanity. In fact, he spoke about Pahalgam in particular, as he went on to say that India faced an inhuman and cowardly terror attack in Pahalgam. In fact, in his message, the Prime Minister said that the terrorist attack in Pahalgam was an attack on all of humanity. It was not an attack on the people there in the country, but it was an attack on all of humanity. In fact, he said that BRICS must adopt a very clear and unified stance on overcoming terror. And on subjects like terrorism, there should be no room for any double standards. The Prime Minister in his message also highlighted that there must be no hesitation whatsoever in imposing sanctions on the terrorists, saying we cannot weigh victims and the supporters of terrorism on the same scale. It was a very, very clear message on Pahalgam and the cross-border terrorism that India faces. As the Prime Minister said, that silent support to terrorism for political interests is absolutely unacceptable, because this is a crime against humanity. In fact, the Ministry of External Affairs also held a very detailed briefing on the BRICS summit, while emphasizing on the Prime Minister's message at BRICS to combat terror.
On the session on peace and security, Honorable Prime Minister underlined that terrorism was a grave threat facing humanity. In this context, he noted that all the leaders have condemned Pahalgam terrorist attack in strongest terms. He underlined that the attack, the Pahalgam attack, terror attack, is an onslaught on the entire humanity. He also noted that those funding, promoting and providing safe havens to terrorists must be dealt with in the harshest terms.
Now, the Prime Minister's message gave this all-encompassing message on combating any form of terror and has made it clear that there is no room for double standards whatsoever. Shortly after the Prime Minister's message, BRICS also issued a joint statement where it condemned the Pahalgam attack in the strongest terms. Let's tell you what has been mentioned in the joint statement that was issued by BRICS. In fact, it has gone on to say that it expresses strong condemnation of any acts of terror, and it goes on to also say that it condemns in the strongest terms the terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir, reaffirming the commitment to combating all forms of terror. And it says in as many words that terror can't be associated with any religion or civilization. It is urging to ensure zero tolerance and reject double standards of any countries on terror. It has also called for the adoption of the Convention on Terror in the UN framework. My colleague Rishabh is joining us on the broadcast with the details. And Rishabh, the Prime Minister has given a very, very strong message to the BRICS summit. In the BRICS summit, while he spoke to the BRICS nations, he spoke about Pahalgam, highlighting that there can't be double standards on Pahalgam. There can't be double standards on terror.
Well, one thing is very clear. After Quad, this is the second global forum where we have been successfully, ensured that Pahalgam terror attack is not only condemned, but the perpetrators behind Pahalgam is also called out. In Quad, Foreign Ministers meeting earlier last week in Washington, where External Affairs Minister Dr. H. Shankar was party to, it was very clear that Pahalgam terror attack was condemned in the most stringent possible way, but also ensured that, any such incident, if it takes place anywhere in the world, a strong message is sent from Quad. Now in BRICS also, India ensured that A, Pahalgam attack is mentioned, B, condemned, and C, the perpetrators are called out. Indian Prime Minister also called out the perpetrators and Pakistan in his address as well. So very categorically, India wants to ensure that what happened in Pahalgam, A, should not repeat, and the world should know and condemn what happened in Pahalgam in a way very categorically, ensuring isolation of the perpetrators of terrorism on global forum.
Okay, all right, Rishabh, do stay with us. The Prime Minister had also put the focus on Global South at the BRICS Summit, and this is very significant because the Prime Minister called for the evolution of the global institutions, many of which, he said, were formed in the 20th century and have failed to evolve over the last 80 years. Let's tell you a bit more about what he has said and why the United States is rattled by the statement that was made at the BRICS Summit. The Prime Minister has spoken about resetting the world order, saying that the Global South has been a victim of the double standards and these countries have suffered for a long time, saying the interests of the Global South have not been given priority historically, and that has continued even now. That global bodies don't accommodate two-thirds of humanity. These are some of the largest economies, these are the most populous countries, and yet they don't get a word in the global bodies, which is unacceptable. The Prime Minister has spoken about making key contributors and they not being given a seat on decision-making tables. The UNSC in particular, the Prime Minister says the key contributors have not been given a seat on the decision-making tables because these changes have just not been made, and that global bodies haven't really evolved themselves in the last 80 years. And the Prime Minister highlighting that BRICS is an organization that can change itself with time, and there is a need to show some resolve for reforms in the UNSC as well as the WTO.
I would like to bring to you your attention on the para 6, where there is a very strong expression for reform of the global multilateral institutions, in particular the UN and the UN Security Council, in which countries of the Global South to play an active role. And this time, that para and that formulation has been further strengthened over the Kazan's formulation, where it got reiterated, reinforced in terms of India and Brazil to play an active role in international affairs and multilateral bodies, in the UN systems and in the Security Council. I think this is a very, very strong reiteration of the role, increasingly important role, both India and Brazil will play. So we are very satisfied with this formulation.
All right, with that, let's shift our attention now. It appears that Operation Sindoor has shaken the former Pakistani Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto enough to trigger a dramatic shift in his stance. From once declaring that either our water will flow or